Hey there! Did you by chance get to experience the infinite joy that is the American public education system? I did, and it taught me a great many things about the world. 1. The mitochondria are the powerhouses of the cell. 2. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And 3. America is heaven on earth and George Washington is the one true God. These are facts. I really liked history as a kid, and year after year would be very disappointed by the classes that were taught. My main problem is that US history classes are taught like this. History started in 1492 when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. He found some land. Then a while later, some British people facing religious persecution decided to flee Britain and settle on this new land to establish a new society based around democracy. There were people already living on this land called Native Americans, but they were pretty chill about the whole thing. Less chill was Britain, who hated democracy and so started being very mean. Then the colonists decided to do a revolution and drove the British into the sea, thus securing liberty and democracy. There was a civil war a little while later about slavery, but don't worry about that, it all worked out in the end. And so my frustrations began because we would never learn anything past the US Civil War by the time the school year ended. And when the school year picked back up again, we would start over with Columbus again for some reason. Don't learn about World War I or II until high school. Sorry, kid. Or at least that's just my experience. Education varies wildly region by region and state by state. Hungry for knowledge, I set about learning history on my own, and what I found was that a lot of what I was being taught was what some people tended to call, bullshit. Yes, I think that's the word. It was all bullshit. So I became keenly aware that there was a world of difference between American history and American mythology. In American mythology, America fought a revolution against tyranny and empire. Having won that revolution, America now seeks to overthrow tyranny and empire across the world so that all people can be free. Whereas in American history, America fought a war of independence to remove British commercial interests, and with that independence has established tyranny and empire across the world on the whims of their own commercial interests. The polar opposites between the two would be hilarious if they were not so tragic. I've always been baffled by the huge differences between American history and American mythology, but what's more is that as a leftist, I think it's easy to see how American mythology could be used to support anarchism. Or at the very least, reduced down to its bullet points, American Revolution sounds suspiciously close to something an anarchist might advocate. I mean, a revolution whose goals are freedom and equality set against the forces of imperialism? Yeah, that sounds pretty anarcho. Now, American history? Absolutely fucking not. But people don't usually internalize American history. People usually internalize American mythology. And internalizing American mythology should make Americans lean leftwards, I would think, in a world that makes some sense anyway. Or to put it another way, how does a nation that teaches revolution at its inception not carry forward a revolutionary spirit? How does a nation that was born out of protest foster a culture that believes that the only legitimate form of protest is one in which the protesters have a government permit and police supervision of all things? As for answers to those questions, I have to say I was utterly captivated by the writings of early American anarchist Voltairine de Cleyre, who wrote an essay titled Anarchism and American Traditions, wherein she talks a lot about these American hypocrisies. What I call differences in American history and American mythology, she calls differences in American tradition and American practice. America says it does one thing, but of course we all know America does another thing. She starts off bemoaning the sorry state of the American public education system, particularly in the way that it treats history. It treats history as if it is a game of simple memorization, where students are expected to memorize the names, dates, and places of battles, but they are never expected to learn the character of the people fighting those battles. What students learn are data points, but they're never taught anything that meaningfully backs up those data points. They don't know what those data points are actually about. And so, for the next generation of Americans, the spirit of revolution in the face of tyranny is not what is held sacred. What is held sacred instead is merely the name George Washington. Americans therefore then continue the legacy of the man Washington at the expense of the legacy of revolution in the face of tyranny. And that kind of says it all, doesn't it? I mean, de Cleyre's work seems to answer my questions, at least. As far as the American Revolution being proto-anarchist in nature, I mean, obviously that's a load of shit, but de Cleyre provides some details. She says that the Founding Fathers, who she calls revolutionary Republicans, set about on revolution under the same aspirations as anarchists, which is the establishment of equal liberty as a political ideal. Where anarchists and these revolutionary Republicans differ is on how this political ideal should be achieved. The Republicans believed that the political ideal of equal liberty can only be approximated through a government based on the principle of majority rule expressed through a republic, whereas anarchists don't want an approximation of the political ideal, they want the real thing, and the real thing cannot be expressed through majority rule, it cannot be expressed through a government at all, it can only be expressed through voluntary associations. And this distinction is what is at the core of the American experiment's failure to achieve its goal of equal liberty. Specifically, the United States failed for 3 reasons: the essence of government, the essence of human nature, and the essence of commerce. As for the essence of government, a government's job is to govern. It seeks to govern, it seeks to do its job, and to do so will oppose and work against any restrictions or checks imposed on it. Even if you start with a small government, as the Revolutionary Republicans tried to do, it's still going to follow the nature of government, and it will grow to do so. Of the essence of human nature, it is de Cleyre's belief that revolutionary spirit cannot be sustained under conditions of material ease. That people are always way more interested in having things than they are in having liberties. Or to put it in my own words, it's very difficult to start a revolution on a full stomach. Of commerce, commerce seeks to extend itself across the entirety of the earth so that it may multiply the needs of humanity and therefore multiply the need for material possessions at the expense of liberty. Commerce increases people's demand for things, so that people then have to demand an increase in commerce. The government then has to grow to meet the requirements of the increase in commerce. And this mechanism is what is behind the many contradictions between American tradition and American practice. De Cleyre then provides examples of where this is the case. It is American tradition that the judiciary be used as a check against unconstitutional legislation, but it is American practice that the judiciary be used to justify unconstitutional legislation so that the government can grow so that it can defend commerce. The right to protest is an American tradition, but it disrupts commerce, so the government has to send police in to restore order. It is American tradition that a standing army is a menace to liberty, and that America should not interfere in the affairs of other nations, but it is American practice to have a very large military, and it is American practice to interfere in the affairs of every nation on earth, because commerce needs to expand, and it needs the government to do so. All the while, the American people are drunk off of the material excess of this empire, and so do not oppose it, even as it seeks to oppose them. Voltairine de Cleyre declares that the United States is an empire that rose out of the ruins of our early freedom, and that it was doomed to fail from the start. That the fatal sin of the revolutionary Republicans was that they did not believe in liberty fully, They believed it was possible to compromise between liberty and government, and that it was possible to restrain government through the use of checks and balances. And that mistake is what allowed the government to grow so large and so powerful that it now uses checks and balances as the mechanism to oppress the American people and the victims of the American empire. Well, I really like this essay and the things Voltairine had to say. She is an amazing writer, and reading her works has been a blast. I have put a link to this essay that I talked about today, Anarchism and American Traditions, in the description below, as well as a link to just more of her works in general. Her writings are short and very powerful. I do find that some of her ideas don't fully vibe well with me, namely her notion that the essence of human nature is solely of a material interest. I think that humanity is way too complicated for there to ever be a single human nature, and that any assertion of there ever being a single human nature will only succeed in revealing an aspect of the greater whole. And of the aspect of materialism, well, I know that I have things. Things. And I have a full belly, I just had a pickle. But even with all that said, I still get pissed off about things, and I trust that you, the viewer, probably have things and are probably pissed off by still other things. What I'm saying is probably an oversimplification of what she was saying, probably, but that's what I got out of the essay, and that's my meek response. And this is a problem I have with a lot of early American anarchist writers, not just Voltairine de Cleyre, but so far of the ones I've read, they all seem to have three things in common: that they barely, if ever, mention Native Americans, they barely, if ever, mention racism, and they all seem to really love Thomas Jefferson. And I'm not surprised that white authors in the 1890s are this way, but it's still uncomfortable to read, and it really is a problem when they get to the parts of their essays where they start trying to present solutions or pathways towards American anarchism. For instance, Voltairine de Cleyre seems to advocate that the only pathway towards American anarchism is independent self-sustenance through the use of agriculture, that it is America's manifest destiny to be agricultural, and that as long as there are new lands for new people to farm, the pioneer lifestyle will maintain America's revolutionary zeal and protect everyone from tyranny, which is, to put it quite plainly, fucked because of the implied imperialism and genocide. Also, there seems to be a big push towards an independent sort of individualism that wants to cast interdependence, especially within cities, as a great evil, when I don't think it is. I think interdependence is kind of the basis of a community. No single person can do every single thing. People need each other. And maybe their notions were simply a product of their time when maybe there was just less stuff to do. But looking back at their writings through a modern lens, I just feel like the rugged individualism they seem to advocate for just is not a good way forward. Well, that's all I really have to say. I hope you enjoyed my book report. And of course, if you have any agreements or disagreements or clarifications, please feel free to leave a comment below. And while you're at it, please recommend me more stuff to read, more political theories, more essays that I might not have heard of. If it were not for YouTube content creator All Gods No Masters commenting on my Thoreau video, I would not have even heard of Voltairine de Cleyre. So please, recommend me some stuff, and thank you. And before you go, please check out some of these other content creators. Kathrin's Do We Need a Spiritual Revolution talks about how material alone might not be enough to satisfy humanity. Beccadagoo's Fare Evasion, about what a bullshit crime fare evasion is, make public transportation actually for the public. And Rutgo's two-parter, Alpha Males Don't Make Sense, wherein he dives into the hellscape of the manosphere so you don't have to. So yeah, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Watch some of my other videos too if you haven't, or my wife's new video about sleep. Do the things. Help us out and help them out. Thank you, and have a nice day.